Good evening and happy holidays to you. Thank you very much for joining us for Newsmaker Live this evening. This is unfortunately our final show for 2012. But I'm sure it's going to be a very, very special one. Again, thank you for joining us for this program as you have done throughout the course of 2012. I am Clinton Reynolds. Joining me for this final program this evening is the former Tourism Minister, Alan Chastanet. We have not seen very much of him around these parts, but he's here to, I guess, wish us season's greetings and also talk about various developments within government, especially as it relates to tourism. So, Alan, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to get here.
I am just as sorry as you are. But it's good to have you anyway. And I mean, there's a lot that we need to catch up on. It's been over a year since the last general election where the SLP has come back into power. But before we get into these things, what have you been up to over the last year?
Well, I promised myself immediately after elections I would really take a long break. You know, I'd been working since I was been 15 years old. I'd realized I'd never stopped working. My father had a deal with me that if he was going to pay for university, I had to work during the summers. And I took a 9-month sabbatical where I just basically did some consultancy work with our family businesses and with some other people, but started going to the gym, go to Vels, and she's great. And just spending time with my family. You know, I remember when I used to leave and go on trips, my kids would just say goodbye. And then recently I went on a trip and my kids started to cry. So, you know, I not realized what a sacrifice that had been by my family when I was involved in politics.
You know, and it takes a toll on you. Sometimes you get so involved that you overlook the very little things that are so significant in your life, you know, family and everything else, seeing them grow up. And all of a sudden, I'm sure you might have realized that they were young and then they're 4 or 5 years older by the time you realized it.
Absolutely. You know, you ignore the people, you take for granted the people who love you the most and who are the closest to you. They're the ones who pay the heaviest price. And I think that applies to all politicians. It's a very, very difficult and demanding job, but one that's also very rewarding. And
in your 9-month sabbatical, you know, your quiet moments of reflection, what occupied your mind most of all during that period?
Really, it was just really catching my breath. I can be honest, if you, I don't think I ever fully recovered from Thomas. The physical toll it took on me, commuting back and forth to Soufrière as many times as I was, still trying to conduct the affairs of the Ministry of Tourism. And you know, the huge responsibility of trying to get a country back up. And I think, I remember a particular scene when we flew over St. Lucia on the Sunday, Guy Joseph, myself, and the chief engineer. And we were flying over Soufrière, I remember specifically, and watching people walking over landslides to get to work. And people were taking boats to go to Anne Chastanet. And when I finally made it to the ground the following day in Soufrière, and I met some people, and despite what had happened to them, they were most concerned about losing their job. So they said, you know, if I don't have my job, I can't fix my house. And so please do everything you can. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that, you know, within 12 days we saw tourists flying back to the island. Within the first week we had a cruise ship back in port. And those things did not happen by accident. And I can tell you that it took a huge toll on me, both emotionally and physically. And the night of the election, if I had to go and recount the next day, I don't think I would have had the energy to recount.
I could well imagine. And talking about tourism, I mean, at that point, our tourism industry, and I've always said that tourism is so fragile an industry to hinge an economy on. It suffered, and we suffered as a result. We would never know the full extent. Because, you know, I mean, they say hindsight is 20/20, and what you could not see, or what you did not see, you cannot or you could not. But how badly, in your estimation, did we suffer as a result of Hurricane Thomas and the after effects?
Well, first of all, I disagree with your statement that tourism is that fragile. I think that tourism in the last decade has proven itself to be an incredibly resilient industry. It survived the Gulf War, the 9/11. It survived major recessions. It survived diseases, terrorism, and yet it was still going, and it's still standing. It's become the biggest industry in the world. I think that what makes tourism appear to be fragile is that it has so many variables. I mean, there's so many things that could go wrong that you always have to be cognizant of. In terms of Thomas's impact on us, clearly it was on an infrastructural perspective. I think it really highlighted the need for the East Coast Road, that we need a bypass to the Castries Gros Islet quadrant, the need for a solution to the water problems that we have, our overdependence on the dam, the basic infrastructure that we have in terms of our road networks and everything else. So it really highlighted in my mind the fragility and the weakness of our overall infrastructure. And so that the vision plan that Sir John had come up with even became more solid in my mind as an absolute requirement. In terms of how did we fare, we fared incredibly well. I think that in fact, St. Lucia could become a case study for a lot of places. We took over the media. People complained about my control of the situation, but what we did is we reported on the positive things. Now people would say maybe that was misleading, but the thing is, in a situation like that, you need to be able to send out positive messages. And as a result of that level of communication, we saw tourism arrivals drop in the month of November by 38%. We saw arrivals drop in the month of December by 4% compared to the previous year. And by January, we were already up 4%. And what I'm proud of is that January number specifically, because that January number was on a huge number from the previous year. So in fact, tourism proved to be very resilient. And I think that I'm hoping that during my tenure as Minister of Tourism, that more and more people will start understanding that tourism is a science and not one of these things that you stick your finger up and just wait to see where the breeze is blowing.
But how much of that was contingent on the fact that people had already made their bookings, and no matter what had happened, you know, with the positive messages that were going out, that they would come in anyway, because, you know, a lot of them had saved for a while to come to St. Lucia, the honeymoon destination of the world, you know, to see the fantastic, majestic pitons that we have, our hot springs and everything else that is so touristic and attractive to foreigners.
It was the relationship that I had specifically with operators, but more importantly, that we constantly had meetings with the Hotels Association, and it was their ability to convince the tour operators and the airlines that we would be ready for business. That is the fun. It's a vote of confidence. It's telling them, your people can come, there will be water in the hotels, that they can drive to from the airport, that there are tours that are going to be available, that the restaurants are up and running, and that people's vacation would be fairly, you know, almost the same as it was pre-Thomas. It's impossible that it would be 100%, but it would be sufficiently so that those guests would be satisfied. Because, you know, the airlines would not want to fly empty planes. The tour operators would not want to sell people down here, and then all of a sudden, the people saying to them, hey, look, you sent me down to this place and the island's not ready. So we had to work very, very hard in convincing all of our partners that we would be up and running. And I got to tell you, I mean, they had people here, and when they saw the state of the Bardale, when they knew what was happening with the dam, they were not 100% convinced. And it was that first cruise ship that came in, and then we got pictures of people going on tours because we were able to open up some tours, and that literally every day we were opening something else up. And it was the ability to communicate that in a timely way and be able to convince those operators that we would be open for business that solved the problem.
Now, I know there's also criticism, because even with that first cruise ship coming in, that cruise ship usually would take water from us, would buy water from us, but was giving us water because we did not have enough. So, I mean, were we really prepared to entertain guests at that point?
We were not, but the cruise ship company knew what we were doing. Okay, we had hosted the FCCA conference here. We'd met with all the executives. There was a tremendous amount of an affinity that the cruise industry had developed for St. Lucia. And when I spoke to Michelle and I spoke to the cruise ship executives, I said it was very important for us as a vote of confidence for the ship to come in. They got back to us and said, not only is the ship going to come in, but we feel for us being able to give back. So they were very honored in being able to show that the cruise ships don't always just take. and to be able to give us water. The guests knew what they were coming to. The guests went up to the zip line up in Babino, and they went on some of the other tours up north. They knew fully what to expect. But it was a vote of confidence. And people were not sold a bag of goods. They knew exactly what they were coming to. And I could never thank the cruise industry and the FCCA and Michelle Page enough, and Royal Caribbean, for what they did.
Now, talking about vote of confidence, no one enters an election expecting not to win. Mm-hmm. And that was not the case for the UWP, because obviously we know the results. I want to talk about that, but we will take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with former Tourism Minister Alan Chastanet. Stay with us. Newsmaker Live will continue right after this break.